Hello, I'm Ross from Britain's Hidden History, and this is part of the bite-size series where you can have a little short break, under 10 minutes, and learn a chunk of British history. Now, today we're doing some English history. It's not just about Wales, alright? This is more to do with England and Scotland, and how that interplays with Britain. And what we're looking at is these two sort of characters, really, who've become sort of semi-mythical, legendary figures, Hengist and Horsa, who were supposed to just arrive like roving adventurers with 6,000 followers and carved out a kingdom. Whereas when you dig into the British history, and this is the point, to look at the British records and see what it says about what happened, and you'll find they actually are historical characters. And you can pretty firmly place who they are and what they're doing there, and who their ancestry is. So I'm going to have a little go at this. And I've got the notes here from Wilson and Blackett, who've done some brilliant research on this area. And the first thing you have to note is that you've got to trace the story back through the ancestors of Hengist and Horsa. And one of their key ancestors is someone called Geta, G-E-T-A. Now, Geta is a very interesting character, because if we go way back to the era about 193 to 211 AD, we have the Emperor Septimus Severus, who was British. And that's for another video. A lot of these so-called Roman emperors were actually British kings. Sometimes just ruling Britain. Sometimes Britain and Gaul and Spain. Sometimes the whole empire. And in occasional interludes, there'd be a Roman emperor ruling Britain. But only short bursts. It's not this 400 years continuous rule that we talk about. So what we're looking at is the first Saxons arriving is actually King Framer and the Alemanni around 398. And we've got more contact with them before that, further north in Scotland, as we'll see. Now, around about 850, Nennius listed these 9 generations before Hengist. So in those days, these things were considered very important by the kings themselves, because that's how you justify your position. So if we go back then to Septimus Severus, you see in the centre, he's fought this war, and the evidence for this is that he's said to have fought Caledonians in Scotland. And one of the things he should be famous for is actually what's called Hadrian's War. Hadrian sort of marked out that border, if you like, as part of his negotiations with the British around about 125 AD. And it's actually Septimus Severus, much later, who came along and actually fortified it. So it should be Septimus's wall, if anything. So that's then the reason he's done this, and you'll see through reading the notes here in more detail, is he's been forced by this sort of Caledonian invasion to retreat the border from the centre of Scotland back down this line with a sort of Solway and Newcastle, where we know Hadrian's Wall is today. And what would seem to have happened then, to sort of make a deal, he has to make a peace treaty. As part of that treaty, he is then married, as you see on screen there, a daughter of Fulginius, who unfortunately we don't know her name, and their son was Geta. The complication comes in that he also has another son by a British princess, possibly called Marcia, and their son was Caracalla, who took on the alternative name Septimus Basanius, and he became an emperor of Rome as well. So the confusion is there that Caracalla would seem to have been concerned about his rival and the rival claim, and that's where we get a lot of the friction between those two. So we have a strange linking of names. So this British war around 205 to 211 AD, where we find a Fulginius and a Geta. And it's possible that this King Fulginius was the grandfather of Geta, the son of Severus the Emperor. Then in the ancestral lists of Hengist and Horsa, they themselves trace back to a Geta who had a son named Foligold. It's almost the same. Even better, the old stories relate to how when King Fulginius fought Septimus Severus, he went over to Scythia to get reinforcements for his army. As all the related Saxon, Alemanni, Vandals, Alans, Cadi, and other nations were Scythian in origin, this is important. And Scythia at this time probably meant Germany and Holland. Equally significant, this is when he moved the border further south. Right, Caracalla, by the way, is traditionally the first British emperor of Rome. So there is no question that northern Britain was the area of the Saxon, Irish, Scot, and later Scandinavian penetration. with King Fulginius fighting his way into the area and compelling Septimus Severus to withdraw the Roman frontiers, or the British frontiers, British Roman, for a distance of over 120 miles. There's every possibility that King Fulginius was a Saxon and that Geta was his grandson. And you have all this, the rigid caste system. The Saxons, the Germanic tribes, are just a rigid caste system and hereditary rules. You couldn't just roll up as an adventurer and be made king. So we have a quick look at the list that Nennius prepared around about 850 AD. There we got Geta, who's probably the link then with the British. And there's the immediate heirs. And we'll see that, Finn Mac Cool, who would have been sort of Irish Scots probably, fighting as auxiliary units along sort of Roman lines, which ties in with the British as well there. And that's probably the source of those stories, which are wonderful stories, by the way. I love, if you get the book The High Deeds of Finn Mac Cool by Rosemary Sutcliffe, I loved it when I was a boy, and I've read it to my own boys. It's great stories, and you could put those now into a historical framework. What might surprise some people who haven't followed the channel, or the works of Wilson and Blackett, is then you have the arrival of the Mercians, who were the Vandals. The Vandals, yes. After charging down through Italy and ended up in North Africa, eventually they get kicked out by forces coming from Constantinople, and they disappear from history. Some say they drifted into the Berbers and whatever. What you'll find is this is when they appear, first of all, in Ireland and across to Britain, where King Arthur chases them across, and it's recorded in the Mabinogi as the pursuit of the Great Boar being the Mercian kings. So you can trace all this back to British history as well. So if you're a Mercian, you're probably a Vandal, if you're in that area, okay? And then we get to Hengist and Horsa, and then we got the descendants, such as the one who fought against King Arthur, the Battle of Badon, about 520 AD. I think that date might shift a bit. And then descendants coming down further than that. Now, one of the key things to think about when you look at the story of Hengist and Horsa is they are said to be brought in by the treacherous Vortigern, Gwyddin, the British king, and he has got a ton of stories all to himself. And he created this civil war where he tried to usurp the British throne, and he brought in reinforcements to help him. And this has been taken as the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons, if you like. But if you look, and they were supposed to be the ones guarding this sort of northeast border. But if you look, where were they stationed? They were stationed in Kent. They become the origin of the Kent kings. That's where this list is described as the Kentish kings. And any first glance at a map, you can see they are clearly not there defending against Saxons' invasions from the northeast. This way as you look. They are there to protect against an attack across from the south, which would be Brittany, which is where you had British forces who were going to try and invade to restore the British king, the authentic British king who should have been on the throne. So that's how they fit into the story. But they're not from nowhere, they're not legends, they're not fiction, they are historical. And it all ties in with treating British historical records more seriously and not just dismissing them as myth and legend. So I hope you enjoyed that. I look forward to the next one. And blessings and peace to you, which in Wales you say heddwch.